Father Sebastian, this novena that we just finished up with Our Lady Guadalupe, during that novena and those interviews, one of the things that really came to the fore in the conversations that I had with these people all around the world was that the Immaculate Conception, Our Lady's privilege and the dogmatic truth of the Immaculate Conception is very closely connected with Our Lady's apparitions in Guadalupe. And so I'm wondering if we can speak a little bit about why that particular Marian privilege is such an essential one and how it might be something of a key to understanding Our Lady.
Yes, absolutely. So you would be able to speak very well, I think, about the different connections between the apparitions and the Immaculate Conception, and feel free to chime in on those whenever you like. One thing that struck me about the apparitions was that when Juan Diego went up for the first time and saw Our Lady, in the Native American Indian account of that, he says, "Is this the paradise that my ancestors spoke of?" Right? The idea of returning to paradise, and you see the new Eve there, huh? And Our Lady there being, free from sin, and wherever she goes, the paradise comes with her, right? And so you see kind of that freedom from sin and that return to original justice that's even reflected in the apparition, for example. Huh? And so for Our Lady, her Immaculate Conception was in view of her divine maternity. It's the reason why she was immaculately conceived, so that she could be fit to be the Mother of God. That's really what it all comes down to. And St. Bernardine of Siena said that it's a general principle in the scriptures that whenever someone is given a lofty vocation, God gives them a proportionate grace to fulfill that vocation. And for Our Lady, that grace could be nothing other than the Immaculate Conception. Because who is worthy to be the Mother of God, right? And the truth of the matter is that the Immaculate Conception means so much more than just being free from original sin. It's true that that's what happened with Our Lady. But the grace she had was remarkable beyond the grace that, for example, Adam and Eve received at the beginning. She could even say about herself, when she spoke to Bernadette in Lourdes, not that I am immaculately conceived, but I am the Immaculate Conception. And theologians hold the position that in the first moment of her conception, the degree of grace in her soul, already at that moment, exceeded the final degree of grace of all the angels and saints combined. I mean, just think about that. Think about how much grace that is in the first moment of her conception. So she's, in that regard, she's not, just like Eve. She's a whole new creation, right?
That just gives a whole new color to the fact that we say she is full of grace.
Yes.
Just that simple biblical phrase right there. That's one word in Greek, full of grace. That's amazing what you just said. Full of grace. We almost don't have an English expression that can sum up what you just said, I don't think.
Yeah, that's true. And even in heaven, I think we won't fully understand the grace in her soul. I think that's true. There's something, St. Thomas said that her grace touches on the infinite because she enters into the hypostatic order. She becomes the Mother of God, and she's elevated to a dignity higher than which no other creature could possibly be elevated. No angel. It's not possible to elevate a creature to a higher dignity than Our Lady had in being called the Mother of God. So her Immaculate Conception was in view of that. Now, once she was immaculately conceived, then you see all the other things that follow from that. For example, it was known in the church early on that Our Lady was assumed into heaven. There were homilies about that from fathers of the church in the early centuries. And it was something witnessed by the apostles, so this is well known. You didn't have a ton of homilies about her Immaculate Conception early on, because in many ways they didn't even have the theological language to describe that, though they spoke of her as spotless, as a new Eve, and things like that.
The God-bearer, the Theotokos,
yes,
that sort of thing.
Right. And so what's interesting is you expected the dogma of her assumption to be defined before her Immaculate Conception. But it was the other way around, because theologically, her Immaculate Conception is prior to her Assumption. Why did she have to be bodily assumed into heaven? Because she was free from all sin and original sin, and therefore did not pay the penalty of death or corruption. Therefore, she had to be bodily assumed into heaven as a result of the grace of her Immaculate Conception. So you see the theological priority. And we could say the same thing about other privileges, mediatrix of grace and co-redemptrix, and those other privileges go back to her Immaculate Conception, which in turn goes back to her divine maternity. Huh?
Right. We usually start with the divine maternity in any conversation about the Marian privileges, because that seems like the place to begin. But I like the fact, Father Sebastian, that you're highlighting how the Immaculate Conception theologically is antecedent to her Assumption, and how it's in a certain sense antecedent even to her divine maternity, when we understand what this Immaculate Conception means. So, Father John Henry, you and I spoke not too long ago about the book that's coming out in the new year about prayer. And in fact, someone just earlier today asked me, where can I pick up that book? And I said, well, it's not out yet. I think it's coming soon. I mentioned that because
you can have his email if you're really interested.
Since you and I have been speaking about prayer frequently when we sit down and talk, and when you're teaching for the Evermode Institute and the other things, it's often about prayer. That it seems to be, for whatever reason, your, at least in my work, your emphasis. So these theological truths that Father Sebastian just elucidated, at least touched on briefly, we could speak about those theological truths for the next 3 hours easily. How do you think this fuels a devout Catholic's life of prayer, especially in this Marian season, which is Advent?
Well, there's a majesty to the theological concepts that Father Sebastian so eloquently described about Our Lady's privileges. And it might, seem that she's, therefore unapproachable, right? That she is so far above and beyond what we are and our own experience of our sinfulness and our confusion and all of the problems that go along with original sin, which are legion, right? But of course, that isn't to the point. She is so far removed from us in the order of grace, but that brings her into a greater intimacy with us because her love is that much greater. So I think, for one, to have that sense that she's the greatest creature, and yet she is the most approachable of them all, and looking at all of the events of the Incarnation with her and through her eyes, especially by the Rosary, I think is a way of really seeing what it meant for her and seeing, therefore, what it should mean for us. John Paul II mentioned sitting at the school of Mary via the Rosary. And, as tremendous as the graces are that she has received, we can, in a sense, learn to see things in that graced way simply by calling upon her and asking her to show us, what did it mean, or what was it like when the angel came to you and when you visited Elizabeth and so forth. And Our Lady will certainly give us those insights so that our daily lives can be transformed, right?
Mm-hmm. Father Pio and I sat down for a conversation. We filmed it just last week, and he said something that it's such a joy to sit down with confreres and visit with them, whether we film it or not. I mean, that's one of the great riches of religious life, is we get to spend so much time together, and with a common view, a common goal, holiness and heaven and the salvation of souls and so forth. We inspire each other. I'm so inspired by my confreres all the time. Father Pio said something last week when we sat down. He was in a very Father Pio Italian-American way playing up Our Lady. I don't know why anybody why does anybody denigrate Marian devotion? Why would anybody be ashamed of that in any way? We need to be on the offensive about our Catholic love for Our Lady. And he said, our natural mothers love us beyond anything we can imagine, but they're fallible, broken, sinful people, and we practically worship our natural mothers because they love us so well. And then he said, then imagine your guardian angel loves you even better than that, even better than your natural mother. And so Our Lady, being as full of grace as Father Sebastian just articulated, when we turn to her in prayer devoutly, like you described, Father John Henry, meditating upon the mysteries of the Rosary, or trying to put ourselves into her lived experience of her role in salvation, we will be so convicted of her love for us. How can we not practically worship? Of course we don't, because she's not God. But it's hard to overstate what kind of devout thrill would come from a pious Catholic's heart, right?
Yeah, and I think it's good in that connection to recognize that she's urgently inviting us into that contemplation. It's not something we are hacking into, right? As though we're kind of intruding into the mysteries of our redemption. It's rather she's calling us into it and saying, you really need to be thinking about these things the way I do, whether it's the Annunciation or the finding of the child Jesus in the temple. Don't use your own thoughts for these things, but see them through my eyes and see what they truly meant. So I like thinking of prayer in that way, because sometimes the energy we put into it is I have to try to kind of penetrate or hack into a mystery, when it's more of an invitation, a graced invitation to enter into the mystery with Our Lady as guide.
This idea of doing that, Father John Henry, I think is probably, that's a great way of describing why we wanted to have Advent with Our Lady. I think the Church always gives us Advent with Our Lady. Advent is all about Our Lady. So this might be a way of unlocking that liturgical truth. So we're canons regular, we're Norbertines. The liturgy is everything for us. Where do you find this kind of penetration of the mysteries of Our Lady's life in the Advent season, Father Sebastian?
For me, it begins with the Scriptures. The Scriptures are all Marian during the Advent season. And I'll tell you, it doesn't matter how many times I read them. I can never fully exhaust them. And each time I come back and there's something new that I discover. I'll give you a little example of that, a little sampling of that. So I've been pondering a little bit about Our Lady's role in the wedding feast of Cana. And it had not occurred to me until just this week, as I was meditating upon that, the connection between the wedding feast of Cana, the Last Supper, and the crucifixion of our Lord. This had never occurred to me before. But think about some of these details. The wedding feast of Cana, of course, Jesus was there. It was a nuptial banquet, and he had invited his 12 disciples. And what does he do? He changes a substance, a liquid, into a more noble substance, right? He changes the water into wine, right? Well, you get to the Last Supper, and there he is with his 12 apostles, and Our Lady is there at the Last Supper, and he changes a liquid, wine, into a more noble substance, into his blood. And during the Last Supper discourse in John, there's a little noted fact that most people they seem to pass over. Jesus on one occasion says that when a woman is in labor and her hour has come, and these are the exact words that Jesus says, to Our Lady when she says they have no wine, and he says, woman, he calls her woman, and he says, my hour is not yet come. And Jesus is identifying her hour with his hour, that moment in the Last Supper. And then, when you get to the crucifixion, another detail that escaped me before but just occurred to me recently, that it was at the moment when Jesus gave Mary John, the beloved disciple, as her son, that it said Jesus knew everything was finished. As if the whole purpose of the crucifixion, of the Last Supper, was that new offspring might be born into the church and Mary would be their mother. And Mary was the one who started that whole process off. Her desire, she knew that as soon as she asked her son to perform that miracle at the wedding feast of Cana, she knew that was the end of her private life with him. From that moment on, Jesus was traveling and often, almost entirely without her. He never, in the Gospels, you only read about her being there on one other occasion, and then she's there for the events of the Passion. But you see all these details in Scripture, and they come out in the Advent cycle of readings, one thing after another. And so for me, the greatest devotion and my greatest experience of a certain kind of filial love for Our Lady comes through the meditation on the Scriptures throughout Advent. Now, of course, there's all the additional liturgical things, all of the antiphon I love most of all is the known antiphon, about Gabriel, the Archangel Gabriel coming to Our Lady, and Our Lady responding with her fiat.
Right. So mid-afternoon prayer every day. During Advent, we have the same antiphon for terce, sext, and non. The same antiphon for terce every day, the same antiphon for sext every day, and Father Sebastian speaking about it. No, mid-afternoon prayer. Yes. Yeah. So that one jumps out at you because it's about the Annunciation. Huh?
Right, exactly. So in any case, I've often told people, this is a funny thing, I've often told people my favorite liturgical season is Advent. Not Easter, not Christmas. I don't know what it is. I love Advent for some reason.
I do too, Father Sebastian. And the music for me is one of the things that is so touching, that the Conditor Alme Siderum is just in tone the first Sunday of Advent. It's just like breathing a new year. It's just, we're back.
I even get irritated in Advent when we have to do another Saints' Day and we don't get to sing the Conditor Alme Siderum. Just tells you how much I like.
You hate St. Lucy?
I know. I feel guilty.
You hate St. Lucy and you hate St. John, St. John of the Cross, and terrible St. Nicholas. Why do you hate St. Nicholas? Yeah, while you were speaking there, Father Sebastian, I was trying to think in my own imagination what about the scriptural cycle of Advent touches me. I love the fact that we return to the book of Isaiah every year. And for some reason, sometimes we call that the fifth gospel, the book of Isaiah. Those prophecies are so closely connected with the Marian realities that we then live in this season and in the next season, in the Christmas season. And Isaiah is just setting it up for us. I love the fact that in our new Abbey church here, we have that side chapel with the Annunciation, and the root springing from the stump of Jesse is depicted there. That was a genius stroke of the artist who developed that cycle. And then I'm also reminded of the Alma Redemptoris Mater, which I think might be my favorite antiphon of the Advent season. We sing that at the end of Compline every night. That's the Marian antiphon. And there's a line in a strophe in there, which is Virgo prius ac posterius. She's a virgin before and after, highlighting Our Lady's perpetual virginity, which is another one of her great privileges, deeply connected with the Immaculate Conception. So I'd like to turn, maybe Father John Henry has something else to say about Advent with Our Lady, but of course we're not talking about anything else tonight than that. But I'd like to speak about Our Lady's perpetual virginity, if it's okay with both of you. That's something that was highlighted by one of the interlocutors of the Our Lady Guadalupe series, Father Gabriel Zaraute, a Spaniard from Toledo, and he mentioned how for the Spaniards, Our Lady is simply La Virgen. She's just the Virgin. In our language, we call her Our Lady. We call her the Blessed Virgin Mary. In Italian, there's every culture has its own expression for how we refer to Our Lady most commonly, and in Spanish is just La Virgen. So her perpetual virginity is something that I would like for us to speak a little bit about, and maybe Father John Henry, you can start. I don't know if you have any thoughts about Our Lady's perpetual virginity, and I'm sad that until about 150 years ago, every Christian of every denomination believed in Our Lady's perpetual virginity. Luther and Calvin, of all people, the great heresiarchs, believed in Our Lady's perpetual virginity before, during, and after our Lord's birth. And it seems like such an offense to Our Lady, to me, that there are any Christians anywhere in the world that don't believe in her perpetual virginity. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about any of this, Father John Henry. I've spoken for a long time now.
That's okay. Well, even to this day, you'll hear, especially American, not necessarily evangelicals, but American Protestants who have objections to Our Lady's role in the economy of salvation, referring to the brethren of the Lord as meaning biological children of Mary. And if you tally that up, you would end up with Mary having about 6 other children. It's, his sisters and brethren are here. And that's really a kind of a cultural prejudice on our part, because in America we have discrete families with, a little bit of an extended family, but you don't see everybody in Orange County as a part of your family, right? You don't see that. In more traditional cultures, you do. You're very tribal in the best possible way. So everybody's a brother and a sister to you. Everybody who shares your blood is a brother and sister to you. And to understand that about Middle Eastern cultures and also other traditional cultures, this is not even a difficulty to say these are the Lord's brethren and these are his sisters. It didn't mean what it means for us in 21st century America. It's a very different thing. So that objection, to me, it's strange that that's even still out there, because it just takes a little bit of cultural education to recognize what that actually meant, right?
There's that facet of it, Father John Henry, for sure. I think the fact that American family life is so different, and in the post-industrial world, it's so different from pre-industrial cultures and for more ancient and traditional family life. I think it also, the fact that this relatively new objection to such a beautiful truth about Our Lady, her being perpetually a virgin, I think it also touches on the many cultural errors about human sexuality and the role, the positive role of a woman that is different and distinct from the male sex. We have so much cultural confusion about gender and human sexuality, and it seems like, therefore, it's not a surprise that this particular facet of Our Lady's life and the reality of her privileges would be something that would be called into question now. Any thoughts about that, Father Sebastian?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm reminded of a conversation I had when I was a teenager.
That was really a long time ago.
It was yes.
That was really a long time.
They did not have recorders back then, and so I'm just going to...
Was there electricity back then, Father Sebastian?
It was all by candlelight. So I was in Banff in Canada, believe it or not, up in the Canadian Rockies. My brother and I liked to travel together, and we were staying at a youth hostel. And we were having a conversation with these other young people, and we mentioned we were Catholic. And this young person immediately objected, and they said, "Oh, all those priests and nuns, they're lying." I said, "What are you talking about?" She says, "No one can live without sex." That's what she said, which I thought was really, odd. I'm like, well, but I've lived without sex, and I'm not even a priest or a nun, So, but it shows you the culture, it shows you like where people are, and, and they're often such slaves to their desires. And, as a priest in the confessional today, I can say that it's a liberating thing to be able to tell people, you realize your happiness is not connected with sex. You can live your life completely celibately and be happy. And that's liberating for people, whatever temptations they have, whatever they're going through, whatever problems they have in their marriage, whatever, right? To hear that is liberating. And Our Lady her perpetual virginity is kind of like the ultimate witness to that. The happiest person who ever lived is simultaneously also a virgin, huh? And if you'll pardon me for going off a little bit on a metaphysical excursion here for a moment.
We'll fasten our safety belts.
Exactly. I want to point out a beautiful truth. There's a principle in philosophy and theology that what's divided in a lower order is united in a higher order. I'll give an example of that, an interesting example of that. If I look at a spot on the wall I can't see both black and white at the same spot. Black and white have to be divided for me in my sight. You see that? But when I understand black and white in my mind, I understand them together simultaneously. Isn't that interesting? In your mind, you can know opposites together, though with your senses, you can't sense opposites together. Isn't that interesting? So a lower order of knowledge, like sensation, divides what's united in a higher order of knowledge, right? Like your understanding. Huh? Well, something like that happens theologically with Our Lady. For us, we're either religious or married, we're consecrated and celibate or we're married. But Our Lady had both. She was both a virgin and a mother. She united what was divided, in a lower order. She brought together the dignity of all vocations in her vocation. Huh? And in that sense, she is able to be, so to speak, a model for everyone, for the married woman who's a mother, for the consecrated virgin. She's a model for everyone because she unites in her person what's divided in our vocations, She has in a higher way. Huh? There's if you don't mind, I'd like to say a little bit about the scriptural basis of Our Lady's virginitas in partu. Okay, so that's a Latin phrase. It means her virginity in giving birth. Okay, because most Catholics know Our Lady remained a virgin before Jesus was born, and after he was born, she never had relations with Joseph. But most people don't know that when the church speaks about Our Lady's perpetual virginity, they don't just mean her spiritual disposition in her soul. The church means she retained her bodily integrity, so that when she gave birth miraculously in such a way that the physical integrity of her body was not harmed. So she remained physically a virgin as well. And that's actually defined in an early church council that said she was a virgin before, during, and after giving birth, right? It's that during part that sounds strange to people. They're like, well, what does that mean? It means that she gave birth without in any way shedding blood, without harming or rupturing her bodily integrity. So where do we find this in the scriptures? There's two places in particular, and a book I recommend on this is Mary and the Mystery of the Covenant by Ignace de la Poterie. So it's a very good book, and anyway, go ahead.
For the confreres in the back of the room, we have that in our libraries. You should read that. You should all read that book.
Yeah.
It's a really good book.
It is. So these are not original arguments from me. This is from Ignace de la Poterie. One text has to do with the salutation in Luke of the angel Gabriel to Mary. We tend to, when we hear the translation of that text, it says, and the one to be born to you will be called holy, the Son of God. Right? That's the angel saying to Mary about her offspring. The one who is to be born to you will be holy, the Son of God. It's translated as an adjective modifying the Son of God. But in fact, the Greek construction is adverbial. In other words, it says, the one who's to be born to you in a holy way will be called the Son of God. Isn't that fascinating? So what does that mean? Born in a holy way, right? And then there's another passage. It's in the prologue of John. Now, we're used to especially if you go to the Extraordinary Form Mass, we're used to the prologue of John saying about us, those who are not born of the will of the man or the will of the flesh, nor of blood, nor of the will of man, but of God, right? That's from the prologue of John, huh? But the Greek there does not have born of blood, but strangely the plural, born of bloods. Sanguinibus in the Latin, huh? Born of bloods in the plural, which is strange in Greek and Latin. But in Hebrew, there's a very good reason why you use the plural. In Hebrew, the word bloods always refers to the shedding of blood through a violent act, such as childbirth. Isn't that interesting? And then, all the texts we have today, the modern versions of the scriptures that we have today, are all founded upon the texts that come out of Alexandria. But we have 6 citations from before the 3rd century. So 6 2nd century and 1st century citations of that verse from the prologue of John from all around the Mediterranean. And every one of those 6 actually says, not those, but he. It's referring to Christ. He who was not born of bloods. And so when you put those things together, you realize, in the prologue of John, it's specifically saying that Our Lady, when she gave birth, she didn't shed blood. In other words, he was miraculously born. And the fathers of the church will describe this by saying it was like she was like light that shined through a glass and did not rupture the glass, and so forth. So that's a beautiful sort of scriptural foundation for this Virginitas in Partu.
And then, of course, what the ancient fathers do with that, Virginitas in Partu, it's so beautiful, that's, first of all, Our Lady herself had to be the first witness of the miraculous nature of our Lord's birth. She was the only witness of that miraculous birth. And so she was the first to see because she was the first to believe, the fathers say. Then also how this act of this miraculous childbearing, without in any way harming the integrity of her flesh, is the exact same thing as the resurrection of our Lord from the sealed tomb.
Yeah.
He rose from the dead through the sealed tomb, and then the angel rolled the stone away the next morning to discover that it was empty. But that her miraculous childbearing is the foreshadowing of his miraculous bodily resurrection and leaving the tomb. So the fathers, of course, knowing the scriptures better than any of us possibly can, do beautiful theological things with those in their reflection.